Boomers and millennials don't just have different experiences, they have completely different definitions of what counts as a luxury and just regular life. Boomers tend to think a lot of things are extras that have millennials over here, like that's literally just basic survival. So here are 9 things boomers see as luxuries that millennials consider the bare minimum. The first is getting a college education. Boomers grew up in a time when college wasn't a must-have for a decent job, but for millennials, it's basically a non-negotiable. Just walking into a factory, getting a job with a handshake, and staying there until retirement like a lot of boomers did, hasn't been a thing for decades. And accordingly, 37% of millennials have at least a bachelor's degree, compared to 25% of boomers. But for that quarter of boomers, most didn't end up with all that much student debt, because getting an education was simply cheaper back then, like a lot cheaper. And millennials have billions of dollars in student debt to prove it. Then there's the issue of women in the workforce. Most boomers didn't grow up this way, as their silent generation moms were expected to stay home while their husbands made the money. And many boomers seem to have retained some of this viewpoint, viewing many millennial women's careers as something akin to a hobby or maybe even selfish. Which ignores 2 major points. One, it's fine for women to get a job just because they want to, it's 2025, but more importantly, for most millennial women, having a career is an existential necessity in today's economy. They do still get held to those old-fashioned gender roles, however. Research has shown that women still get stuck doing most of the housework and childcare, even in the most egalitarian marriages. Next, boomers tend to find racial and ethnic diversity to be a luxury. That's the wrong word, but well, how can I put this delicately? The boomer generation may have been deeply involved in the civil rights movement, but it seems, especially nowadays, that diversity was more of a noble idea to them than an actual priority. Millennials, on the other hand, grew up in diverse schools, neighborhoods, friend groups. To most of them, inclusion isn't a bonus, it's a basic expectation, which makes the current efforts toward dismantling diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, or DEI, pretty jarring. It's unclear how future generations will view diversity, but studies, actual data rather than political propaganda, shows that diversity actually benefits everyone in an organization or community. So, food for thought. Boomers mostly saw it as a bonus if they received financial support or housing from their parents. The help was appreciated, but it was far from expected because when they left home, they were mostly able to fend for themselves. Millennials, on the other hand, entered into an economy with staggering rents, wages stuck well in the past, and home buying basically a pipe dream unless you're pulling down major cash. So yeah, living with parents for a bit longer than what used to be normal is just kind of financial strategy now, and not indicative of failure, despite how many boomers call it laziness. Next, boomers really had no choice when it comes to whether or not to get married. That's just what you did. It was the next life step after graduating high school and getting that first job. Mores have loosened. Many millennials just don't think marriage is necessary to have a healthy relationship. And statistics show 40% find it to be an outdated tradition altogether. When choosing their paths, a partner isn't necessarily part of the equation. And just like marriage was a priority for boomers, so was having kids. It was just expected. But millennials are thinking really hard before signing up for parenthood. They're not just having kids because their friends are or because their mom wants a grandchild. Between money struggles, climate anxiety, and, just not wanting kids sometimes, many are saying pass or maybe later. Job hopping is another area where boomers and millennials really differ. Boomers tended to stick with one job for decades and climbed their way up the ladder over many years at the same place because loyalty was everything. Millennials, on the other hand, switch jobs like they switch streaming services. But it's not because they're unreliable, it's because things have drastically changed. Leaving for a better opportunity is really the only way to get that pay bump or promotion these days because raises are tiny, benefits are meh, and job security is an old-fashioned illusion. You gotta keep it moving. A healthy work-life balance was a boomer luxury that most millennials don't really get anymore. And speaking of work, a healthy work-life balance was a luxury to boomers. They overworked and put work before everything else, and they loved it. They wore it like a badge of honor, and many still do in the workforce today. Millennial workers, however, are not about that grind culture. They want jobs that respect their time, their mental health, and, shocker, their lives outside of work. And if they don't get it, they'll often quit. Boomers think open layouts are a luxury, but it's the bare minimum for many millennials. Boomers love their private offices and walled-off homes, and honestly, I kind of don't blame them. Having defined spaces and, of doors you can close is sort of a lost art nowadays. Millennials, on the other hand, tend to love an open concept, whether at home or the office. The idea of cubicles and small rooms feels really outdated to many of them, though this is changing fast. In fact, many contractors say they're getting hired nowadays more and more to put walls back up that were knocked down for open concepts. And as a lifelong hater of open floor plans, I say thank God. Anyway, boomers and millennials may never fully see eye to eye, but these generational shifts highlight just how much the world has changed over a pretty short period of time. And of course, future generations will have their own ideas about what counts as a luxury, what counts as the bare minimum. So I guess Gen Z and Gen Alpha eventually arguing over this same kind of stuff down the road is something we can all look forward to.